The morning had started like any other ordinary day, but something about my wife's condition had been bothering me for a while. For the past few days, she had been unusually quiet. She complained about feeling tired, dizzy, and sometimes a little nauseous. At first, we both laughed it off, thinking it might just be stress or a minor seasonal illness. But when the symptoms didn't go away, we decided it would be better to visit a doctor and get everything checked. The clinic was calm and quiet when we arrived. The soft humming of the air conditioner filled the waiting room, while a few other patients sat silently in their chairs. My wife sat beside me holding her purse tightly in her lap. Normally she was talkative and cheerful, but today she seemed distant. I noticed how she kept looking down at the floor. Instead of meeting my eyes, "Are you feeling okay?" I asked gently. She forced a small smile. "Yeah. I'm fine. I'm probably just overthinking it." Still, something about her voice felt different after a short wait. The nurse called her name and we walked into the examination room. The doctor greeted us politely and began asking a few routine questions about her health. He ordered a couple of tests just to be safe. We waited again while the results were prepared. Those 30 minutes felt longer than they should have. When the doctor finally returned with the test report in his hand, his expression looked serious. He sat down across from us and carefully studied the paper. His eyes moved slowly across the results, as if he were double-checking something important. I felt a small knot forming in my stomach. My wife sat very still beside me. I could feel the tension in the room, growing thicker with every passing second. Finally, the doctor looked up, but instead of speaking loudly like before, he leaned slightly closer toward me. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Your wife has been pregnant before." For a moment, I thought I had heard him wrong. What I asked, confused, he repeated it again, quietly pointing at the report. "The medical indicators show that she had a previous pregnancy." My mind instantly froze. That didn't make sense. My wife and I had been married for a year, and during all that time, she had always told me she had never been pregnant before. We had talked about our pasts many times, sharing stories from our lives before we met. She had always seemed open and honest with me. So how could this be possible? Slowly, I turned my head and looked at her. She wasn't looking at the doctor. She wasn't even looking at me. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, and her hands were tightly clasped together in her lap. At that moment, a strange feeling of confusion crept into my chest. Questions began forming in my mind faster than I could process them. Was the doctor mistaken? Or was there something about my wife's past that I had never known? The doctor's words continued echoing in my mind. "Your wife has been pregnant before." I kept staring at the report in his hand, hoping he would suddenly laugh and say it was just a misunderstanding. But his serious expression didn't change. Instead, he calmly placed the file on the desk and folded his hands together. "There are certain medical indicators," he explained carefully. "They show signs of a previous pregnancy. These results are usually very accurate." My heart began beating faster. Slowly, I turned toward my wife again. She still hadn't looked up. Her shoulders seemed tense and her fingers were tightly intertwined, as if she were trying to hold herself together. "Is this true?" I asked quietly. For a moment, she didn't respond. The silence in the room felt unbearable. The doctor cleared his throat gently and looked between us. "If you'd like, I can step outside for a moment," he said, sensing the tension. Neither of us answered. My wife finally lifted her head slightly, but her eyes were filled with uncertainty. I had never seen her look like this before. She looked nervous, almost scared as she started, but the words stopped in her throat. My mind was racing with thoughts. We had been married for a year. Before that, we had dated for nearly 2 years. In all that time, we had shared countless conversations about our lives. She had told me about her childhood, her college years, her first job, and even small embarrassing memories from school. But never once had she mentioned anything about a pregnancy. Was this some kind of medical mistake? I turned back to the doctor. "Could the test be wrong?" I asked. He shook his head slightly. "It's unlikely. These signs don't usually appear without a prior pregnancy." His calm tone only made the situation feel heavier. I looked back at my wife again, this time. Our eyes met for a brief second before she quickly looked away. That reaction alone made my chest tighten. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked softly, trying to keep my voice steady. She inhaled deeply as if preparing herself to speak. But again, no words came out. I noticed her hands beginning to tremble. Suddenly, the doctor stood up. "I'll give you both some privacy," he said gently. "Take your time." He walked out of the room and quietly closed the door behind him. Now it was just the two of us. The quiet felt overwhelming. I leaned forward slightly. Resting my elbows on my knees, "Please," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just tell me what's going on." My wife closed her eyes for a moment. A tear slowly rolled down her cheek. When she opened her eyes again, they were filled with a mixture of fear and regret. "I wanted to tell you," she said softly many times. My heart sank as soon as I heard those words, because in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't a medical mistake. There really was a secret from her past, and I was about to hear it for the first time. The room felt painfully quiet after her last words. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, and the distant voices of nurses outside in the hallway. But inside that small room, it felt like time had completely stopped. My wife wiped the tear from her cheek, but more quickly followed. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I never meant to hide it forever," she said softly. "I was just afraid." Her voice trembled with every word. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. My mind was still spinning with confusion, but I knew interrupting her now would only make things harder. She looked down at her hands again. "This happened years before I met you." She began slowly. "Back when I was in college." The tension in my chest tightened. "I was in a relationship with someone," she continued. "At first, everything seemed perfect. He was kind, supportive, and I thought we were going to build a future together." Her words came slowly, like someone reopening an old wound. "But things changed," she said. "We started arguing more and more. He became distant. And then one day, I found out something that completely broke my trust." She paused again, gathering her thoughts. "He had been seeing someone else behind my back." I clenched my jaw slightly, feeling a mix of anger and sympathy. I was already struggling with the relationship when something else happened. She said quietly, "I discovered that I was pregnant." The words hung in the air between us. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what to do. She whispered, "I told him about it, hoping maybe it would make him realize how serious things had become." She shook her head slowly, but instead he panicked, her eyes filled with tears again. "He told me he wasn't ready to be a father. He said it would ruin his life, his career, everything." The pain in her voice was impossible to ignore. "I felt completely alone," she continued. "The family was going through financial problems at the time, and I was afraid of disappointing them. I didn't know who to talk to or where to turn." I could see how difficult it was for her to say all this. "So I made a decision that still haunts me," she said quietly. Her voice nearly broke. "I ended the pregnancy." The words hit me like a sudden wave. She quickly looked at me, her face filled with guilt. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," she said through tears. I cried for weeks afterward. I kept asking myself if I had made the right choice. I didn't know what to say. I promised myself that if I ever got another chance at happiness, I would never make that mistake again. She continued. She wiped her face again and took another shaky breath. "When I met you, everything felt different," she said softly. "You were kind, honest, and you made me feel safe." Her eyes met mine again. "But every time I thought about telling you this, I became terrified of what I asked." Quietly, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Terrified that you would see me differently and walk away." Her last words stayed in the air between us. "Terrified that you would see me differently and walk away." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could see how much courage it had taken for her to finally say everything out loud. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked at me as if she were waiting for a final judgment. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything I had just heard. Part of me felt shocked after all. This was something I had never expected to hear. When we married, I believed I knew almost everything about her life. We had always promised each other honesty, but another part of me could see the pain she had been carrying. All these years she had been young, alone, and in a difficult situation when it happened. People often make decisions under pressure that they later regret. Listening to her story, I realized that she had been dealing with guilt for a long time. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. Her voice was barely audible. "I should have told you earlier. I just didn't want to lose you." I looked at her carefully. This wasn't the confident woman I knew at home right now. She looked vulnerable, like someone who had been holding a heavy secret for too long. Why didn't you trust me with the truth? I asked quietly. She lowered her eyes again. Because I thought you might think I was irresponsible, or that I had made a terrible mistake. That defined who I am. Her words made me think deeply. Everyone has a past. No one's life is completely perfect. Sometimes people hide painful memories because they fear being judged by the ones they love the most. I slowly reached out and placed my hand over hers. She looked up at me in surprise. I won't pretend that this is easy to hear, I admitted honestly. But your past doesn't change the person you are today. A tear slid down her cheek again. But this time it looked different. More like relief than fear. You were honest with me now. I continued, and that matters. She squeezed my hand gently. I was so scared, she said. I kept imagining the moment you would find out. I nodded slowly. Well, now I know, I said. Just then there was a gentle knock on the door. The doctor stepped back into the room holding another report. He looked at both of us carefully, noticing the emotional atmosphere. Everything okay? He asked politely. I took a deep breath and nodded yes, I replied calmly. The doctor then explained that aside from the past medical indicator, my wife's current health looked completely normal. There was nothing serious to worry about. Hearing that lifted a weight from both of us. As we left the clinic together, the afternoon sunlight felt warmer than before. The truth had been painful, but it had also removed a wall that had quietly existed between us. And for the first time that day, I realized something important. Sometimes secrets don't destroy a relationship. Sometimes they reveal how strong it truly is.